Amy Slaton and Michael Halterman's love story once felt like the kind that small-town dreams are made of. Two teenagers from Dixon, Kentucky, finding each other in the hallways of their high school, holding on through the slow, quiet years that followed, and eventually building what looked, from the outside at least, like a forever kind of life. Anyone who watched 1,000-Pound Sisters saw the sweetest chapters of that story unfold on screen. The nervous giggles when they finally tied the knot after more than a decade together, the tender way Michael looked at Amy when she walked down the aisle in Nashville, the overwhelming joy when they welcomed their first son, Gage, and then, less than 2 years later, little Glenn. For a long time, they seemed like proof that ordinary people could find extraordinary happiness if they just loved each other enough. But love, even the kind that starts in high school and survives elopements and reality television cameras, is rarely simple. Somewhere along the way, the fairy tale began to fray. What once felt effortless turned exhausting. What once felt like partnership started to feel like Amy carrying the entire weight of their family on her shoulders while Michael drifted further and further into the background. By the time the divorce papers were signed in September 2023, the couple who had once been each other's whole world had become strangers living separate lives under the harsh glare of public scrutiny. To understand how Amy Slaton and Michael Halterman went from teenage sweethearts to ex-spouses sharing custody of two little boys, you have to go all the way back to the beginning, back before the TLC cameras ever showed up, back when Dixon, Kentucky, was just home and the future still felt wide open. Amy was never the kind of girl who blended into the background. Even in high school, she had a laugh that carried across rooms and a way of telling stories that made people lean in. She was funny, unapologetically herself, and fiercely loyal to the people she loved. Michael was quieter, steadier, the kind of boy who didn't need to be the center of attention because he was content just to be near the girl who was. They started dating sometime in the early 2000s, when flip phones were still a luxury and MySpace was the height of social media. There were no grand gestures or dramatic promposal moments captured on video, there was just the slow, certain knowledge that they belonged together. For more than 10 years, they built a life in the spaces between paychecks and family gatherings and quiet nights on the couch. Amy started posting YouTube videos, makeup tutorials, mukbangs, vlogs about her day-to-day life, and slowly grew an audience that adored her honesty and humor. Michael worked at the mill, came home tired but steady, and seemed happy to let Amy shine. When people asked why they hadn't gotten married yet, Amy would laugh and say they were waiting for the right time. The truth was simpler, they already felt married. A ring and a piece of paper didn't seem urgent when you'd already chosen each other for life. Then, in 2017, they eloped. No big wedding, no cameras, just the two of them making it official in the quiet way they'd always done things. 2 years later, when 1,000-Pound Sisters came calling, they decided to have the big wedding they'd never bothered with before. March 2019, Nashville, Tennessee. Amy wore a beautiful gown that made her feel like a princess, Michael cleaned up in a suit that made him look almost unfamiliar, and their families cried happy tears as they finally said, "I do," in front of the world. It felt like the perfect culmination of everything they'd been building for nearly 2 decades. For a while, it really was perfect. Amy threw herself into her weight loss journey with the kind of determination that inspired millions. Michael stood by her side, quiet but present, the supportive husband fans loved precisely because he never tried to steal her spotlight. They bought a little house in Dixon, filled it with second-hand furniture and love, and started talking seriously about starting a family. When Amy found out she was pregnant with Gage, the joy was palpable. You could hear it in her voice when she told the cameras, see it in the way Michael's hand never left her belly. Gage arrived in November 2020, all chubby cheeks and perfect fingers, and for a moment everything felt exactly right. Here was the family they'd dreamed of. Here was the future they'd been working towards since they were kids, sneaking glances at each other in study hall. But babies change everything, and not always in the ways you expect. The first few months were a blur of sleepless nights and endless diapers, the kind of chaos every new parent knows too well. Only for Amy and Michael, that chaos came with an extra layer of pressure, the knowledge that millions of people were watching, waiting for the next episode, ready to weigh in on every decision they made. Amy, who had always been the one to carry the emotional weight of their relationship, suddenly found herself carrying the physical weight too. Feedings, doctor's appointments, laundry that never ended, she handled it all, often with Gage strapped to her chest and a camera crew trailing behind her. Michael tried, at least in the beginning. There were moments caught on camera where he held his son with a kind of gentle awe, where he looked at Amy with the same love that had sustained them for 15 years. But as the weeks turned into months, something shifted. Michael went back to work at the mill. He came home exhausted, retreated to his video games, and left more and more of the parenting to Amy. What started as understandable fatigue slowly hardened into a pattern, Amy awake at 3 a.m. with a crying baby while Michael slept soundly in the next room. Amy juggling bottles and binkies and filming schedules while Michael scrolled on his phone. Amy crying in the bathroom because she felt so alone while Michael barely seemed to notice. When Glenn arrived in July 2022, the cracks that had been forming for 2 years finally split wide open. 2 babies under 2 is hard for any couple, but it was especially brutal for Amy, who was still trying to lose weight, still trying to film a television show, still trying to be the bubbly, optimistic person her fans expected her to be. She loved her boys more than anything in the world, but she was drowning. And every time she reached for Michael's hand, he wasn't there. The fights started small, a sharp comment about dishes left in the sink. A frustrated sigh when Michael spent another evening glued to his PlayStation while the babies screamed. But small fights have a way of growing when no one is willing to bend. Amy begged Michael to step up, to be the partner she needed, the father their boys deserved. Michael retreated further, either unable or unwilling to give her what she was asking for. Friends and family noticed the tension. The camera crews definitely noticed. And the viewers, millions of them, watched in real time as the marriage that had once seemed unbreakable began to crumble. By early 2023, Amy had reached her breaking point. She packed up the boys and moved out of the house they'd shared for years. The separation wasn't dramatic in the way tabloids love, no screaming matches caught on Ring cameras, no explosive social media posts. It was quiet the way only the end of something truly real can be quiet. 2 people who had loved each other since they were children realizing, with a kind of aching sadness, that love wasn't enough anymore. In March 2023, Michael filed for divorce. The paperwork cited irreconcilable differences, which felt almost laughably inadequate for the depth of what had been lost. For nearly 20 years they had been Amy and Michael, a single unit, 2 halves of the same whole. Now they were just Amy and Michael, 2 separate names on legal documents that would decide the rest of their lives.